Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real, and I'm your host, Bob Gallagher. I'm joined in the studio by my guest, Sean Robbins of Ross Mortgage Company, and Carlos Vargas, founder and partner of Vargas Insurance, along with Jeff Camara, managing partner of Vargas Insurance. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we asked you to join us in the studio today, Carlos and Jeff, so we could talk about insurance, and you can enlighten us and our audience about all things insurance. One of the most interesting topics there is to talk about. But seriously, there's a lot of information that a lot of people aren't aware of, which is why we wanted you to come in and talk about it. Why don't we start here? Can you explain the different types of agents?
Sure, I can grab that for you. So there's independent and captive. So Vargas Insurance, we're independent.
Okay.
So what does that mean? We represent several companies in-house. So when a client calls us for an insurance quote, we're kind of looking at the entire picture. Not just on price. You have an in-home business, maybe a certain dog insurance company doesn't love. We have that flexibility to kind of shop you around. And then the captive is like a Liberty Mutual, a Geico, Allstate, all great companies. Only difference is they just represent that one carrier.
Right.
So kind of, the win for us is that we've all kind of seen the stories where, hey, I've been non-renewed. I had too many claims last year, and I got that letter in the mail 60 days before saying, hey, Jeff, thanks for your business, but when your policy's expiring, we're not going to renew it for you. At least we can keep that client, who we have 8 other companies in-house to shop it with, where the captive guys have a hard time because it's one carrier. So if it's been non-renewed, it's a little tougher to keep that client, nearly impossible.
Right. I'm actually glad you brought that up. A lot of people, especially first-time buyers that might be listening, don't realize that insurance isn't just a piggy bank to replace things when they get old or when somebody tips over your TV at a party.
Correct.
Why don't you talk about the downside of putting in claims, especially when you're talking about small ones?
Absolutely. So a good agent should review that with you. So when a claim does arise, they want to look at it with you and say, okay, what's happening here? And you're right, it's not a maintenance policy. So, if the house is old and needs paint, it's not there to cover it for you. If something major happens, that's what the insurance is for. Give an example. Yeah, we have a bad winter, we have an ice dam, and it causes $10,000 of damage. That's something you want to file a claim.
Right.
You got a small pipe leak, and you have a $1,000 deductible, and you're going to net out $200. Do you want to put that black mark on your file for possibly ever shopping your policy or being renewed? So a good agent's going to review that with you and say, hey, does this make sense?
Right.
Are you going to gain enough money out of this to put the loss in? End of the day, it's your policy. You make the decision, but a good agent should educate you on the pros and cons and why you should or shouldn't put that claim in.
Excellent. What's involved in becoming an insurance agent?
Well, first you have to apply for your license. You study, you pass it. But really, you should. It's a great career. I started in it 37 years ago, and just get your learning somewhere. So either work for like an independent shop. I started off as a direct writer, and I learned my prospecting, my networking there, and then we opened up Vargas Insurance. So study, license, and then the continuing ed. It's pretty simple.
What kind of continuing ed do you guys have in your business?
So it's property and casualties, what we do, and also the life and health. So it's basic stuff, probably very similar to what realtors go through, where you kind of go to the class, they talk about certain topics. Hey, here's your auto policy. How does it work? Your home policy coverage, exclusions, endorsements. So basically, it keeps you up to date with everything going on. So the nice thing is that it's not a set and forget it. So I have my license every 3 years. I need to renew it. It's 45 credit hours I need to have done before the renewal. So the nice thing is that you're always, in the know kind of deal. You're not. Things change. Policy, the homeowner's policy's probably had 4 different forms, in the last 10 years. So you kind of make sure that you're in the most current. You know exactly how it works, and that's what the education does. It keeps you up to beat.
Sean and I are in the mortgage business, and when you said every 3 years you have to go through a renewal, I was like, wow, we have it way tougher than you guys. Until you said 45 hours, we have to do it every year. But I think ours is 8.
Yeah.
Wow.
45 hours. That's a fair amount. That's more than a week's worth of work.
It's a lot. It's quite a bit. I mean, you're looking at a class is usually a day and a half. I have a few designations, which will be I'm in class 2 days and I'm testing on the 3rd day. So it's a pretty involved process. They want to make sure that, hey, if you're out there representing these carriers in Division of Insurance, you know what you're talking about. They don't want anybody just selling a policy. And we're lucky where in Massachusetts, people that work for us are allowed to service a policy and write a policy, but a lot of states don't allow that. So if you're in a certain state where if you want to be in the insurance game, you need to have that license.
Right. Why don't we talk a little bit about deductibles and when they apply?
Sure.
Do you want to?
Sure.
Do we have that? Yeah, so the deductible comes into place every time you have a claim. Some folks go with the low deductible, but then you're putting in all these little claims that are going to go eventually against you. I carry a $2,500 deductible. I figured if something's major, I'm going to put in a claim, but if something's not that huge, then it's definitely worth paying for it out of pocket because it doesn't affect the renewal. Or the actual, you go from a preferred risk to a standard risk, you might incur a 15 or 20% rate increase every year because you put in a claim.
Right.
Now, the deductible is usually what comes out of your pocket before the insurance company finishes paying the damage.
And does having a higher deductible also reduce the cost of the policy?
It saves you money, absolutely.
It does. It does help. The thing with deductibles, too, unfortunately, is that you're always going to pay it, like Carlos said. The neighbor's tree fell and hit your house. You can't go after the neighbor for it. It was an act of God, so your policy step in and pay. Only advice I can give to any homeowner, especially when it comes to claims and deductibles, if anybody ever causes damage to your property, you go after them as well. And an example of that would be, I'm coming home late at night, I'm not paying attention, and I hit your fence. Well, your home policy covers that, but the deductible comes into play. If you come after my policy as well, at least that's going to cover to repair your fence. If you put a claim against the homeowner's policy, you're paying nothing out of pocket because everyone carries property damage. So deductibles unfortunately happen all the time, and we get phone calls on a monthly basis saying, hey, my neighbor's tree fell and hit my house. I need to put a claim against their policy. We need to put a claim against your policy. Those act of God, if I was out there cutting a tree down and I hit your house, then it's my fault. You come after me personally.
Right.
But, if my tree just fell because it's old and tired, you're going to pay your deductible.
That's tough.
It is tough.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So why don't we move on? Let's talk about big exclusions on policies. Can you give us some examples of those?
So a big one's flooding. So kind of keep in your mind when it comes to water from the top down, you have coverage. A leaky pipe, a leaky roof. You filled the tub, to give the kids a bath and you forget about it and it overflows. You have coverage for that. We get heavy rains and your basement takes in 3 inches of water. There is no coverage for that. We get that April Fool's snowstorm. We get a foot of snow, and the next day it's 70, and all that snow melts, and it comes into your basement. There's no coverage for that. Termites and rodents are not covered on a policy. There's one insurance video out there on TV, a commercial that they have the guy dressed up as a raccoon, and he's chewing on the insulation, and he says, if you have a cut throat policy, you may not have coverage for this. Well, nobody in Massachusetts covers that. If you got a raccoon in your attic, and that raccoon put a 2-foot hole up the side of the house to get out, no policy covers that for you. Wear and tear is not covered. The example I give for that is, we have a car. 3 years from now, the car needs brakes. You don't call your insurance company to pay for those brakes. The car needs tires. Same thing. You don't call the insurance company. Same thing with the home. The outside needs to be painted. That's part of owning a home. The furnace gets old and doesn't want to be as efficient anymore. You need to replace it. They don't cover those things.
Right.
So those kind of the big ones that we see that folks kind of don't pay attention to.
Actually, I have heard, and I don't know if you guys sell it or if it's even something you could buy in Massachusetts, but isn't there a policy you can get now that will cover maintenance items in the home?
It'd be separate from your homeowners.
Right,
so
right.
It could come through, like your electric company could offer it. We haven't seen any of those through our carriers. Some are starting to offer, like, the AC breakdown. So if you have an AC unit, you can add that on. And that's pretty inexpensive. But the home policies are still holding pretty strong on, hey, these are our exclusions.
Yeah.
What happens, it's a domino effect. So once one company does it, they all jump on board.
Gotcha.
So as soon as somebody takes that leap of faith, we'll have some coverage where they'll all offer the same thing.
Right.
A big exclusion, too, kind of brings me back to, unfortunately, we talk about the whole Boston Marathon bombing, but when that all happened and the police had to go take shelter in those homes in Watertown, if the police go into your property and they need to use it for whatever reason, they cause damage, there is no coverage on the policy. So a good rule of thumb is that if a federal body goes into your home, for whatever reason causes damage, you're not going to have coverage through the insurance company.
Does the government pay for it?
I'm sure they self-insure, so I'm sure it's a long process to get paid.
Yeah.
It's almost kind of like if, we had a client that had a property investment, and he said to me, best tenant I ever had. Tenant paid me on time, never had any issues. Paid me in cash. Come to find out that tenant was using that house to store his drugs.
Oh, Jesus.
The insurance company, goes in there. Not the insurance company. The police go in there to kind of do a raid. And as you know, police are looking for drugs. They can tear the place apart.
Yeah.
So they put a bunch of holes and kitchen cabinets were ripped down. And they had called us. And I said, well, there's no coverage. A, selling drugs is illegal. So you can't do illegal acts in a property even though it wasn't you. And then B, it was the police that went into your property that caused that damage. The insurance company's not going to pay that. You go after the city that caused it, and hopefully they'll make you whole.
Wow.
Good luck suing City Hall, right?
Good luck,
Town
yeah.
Hall, right?
Yeah, and that's I've been reading a lot lately about now that marijuana's been legalized in Massachusetts, they're talking about why it's going to take so long to implement it, and it's sort of like what you were talking about. I mean, at the federal level, it's still illegal, so you've got issues with insurance and you don't want to own property that's being used that way because the feds decide to take it. You're pretty much screwed. There's nothing you can do about it.
Correct.
So it sounds like insurance is going to be the same issue.
It will be.
Wow. It's good to know. Why don't we talk about optional or additional and extended coverages?
Want to cover that?
Want me to cover that?
Yep.
So, I mean, with your homeowners, you can always add extended coverage on there for replacement cost on the home. That's a big one a lot of people kind of don't think about. So what's that replacement cost say? Well, there's no such thing as true replacement cost. Most companies set a limit, either 25% or 50% above your coverage A. So what's your coverage A? That's your dwelling. So if your house is insured for $100,000 and you have additional 50%, you have $150,000 of coverage. And what that does is if the house was to burn to the ground, the insurance agent made a mistake, and you needed more than $100,000 of coverage, their promise to you is, hey, we'll pay up to $150,000 to make you whole again. You can add endorsements on for earthquakes. That's a big one that people don't think about. And we have a few clients that we've done insurance for that are very bright, work at MIT. And the first thing they say to me is, hey, Jeff, add on the earthquake rider. Because, it's going to happen. And when it does, I want to have coverage. I don't want to be waiting for the government to pay me to make me whole again. I want to go through my insurance company. You can add on endorsements for jewelry, fine arts, furs, golf. The limit goes, the lines go on and on. I mean, there's so many things you can add to that policy to make it work for you.
Right.
And that goes back to finding somebody you want to work with.
Right.
Because your insurance agent, we've been blessed. Carlos has had clients since, 87 with the agency. And these people, have never left, probably never will leave. They have a good working relationship with us. So you want to find somebody in that game that says, I understand the policy, I understand your needs. It's not just an order taker. When I talk to somebody, hey, what do you do for work? Do you collect certain things? Well, I love reading books. I have some, very expensive books I want to insure. Well, how do we cover those? I'm into art. Whatever it may be, we'll make sure we properly insure that for you because when a claim arises, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news.
Excellent.
So, Jeff, is that different than an umbrella policy?
So umbrella's a little different. Umbrella, just like it sounds, it kind of sits on top of everything and protects you from a rainstorm. So let's say, use me for example. I have my home insurance. I have $500,000 of liability at my property. And then on my auto, I have $250,000 per person, $500,000 per accident. Carlos and I are driving here today. I'm not paying attention, and I get into an accident. And Carlos gets severely injured, and he sues me, and he wins $500,000. My auto's going to pay the first $250,000 because that's what I carry, and then my umbrella pays the additional $250,000 to get to the $500,000. So the umbrella sits on top of your home and your auto and protects you, and it's a great thing to have. If you own some real estate, and I tell people saying, well, I have the homestead. If I injure somebody, they can't take my home. And Carlos and I always say, well, it's not about people not taking what's yours. I understand you worked hard for it. It was a mistake. If somebody's injured because of my own fault, I want to make them whole again. God forbid somebody's crossing the street, I'm not paying attention, I hit them, and now they're in a wheelchair. That person should get something from me because it was my fault. I caused that injury. Right. And that's where the umbrella steps in and gives you that peace of mind. And we tell people, it's not about kind of what you have in the bank or what you're making. It's about protecting your future because that's what we're all doing.
Right.
We could easily get a big raise at work tomorrow, and all of a sudden you go from making X to making Y. What if something happens? You don't want the courts to go after you personally and make you pay out of your pocket.
Right. Good advice.
Plus an umbrella policy is so cheap, right? It's probably a couple $100 a year.
Inexpensive.
Right. So it's worth having the protection.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Can you guys share some? You've got to have some interesting stories about crazy claims over the year. Any years? Anything that stands out?
Well, when it comes to claims, I mean, there's been a few. I mean, we had one recently where somebody owned a condo. They were told they had kind of the all-inclusive walls-in policy. Well, there was a leaky pipe that caused damage in the unit. They went to file the claim with their condo master, and the condo master said, hey, we don't cover that. That's an exclusion on the policy.
Right.
That person did not purchase what they call an HO6, which is a homeowner's policy. If they did, that would afford the coverage for them. We've had people that I had a claim that was actually filed probably a few years ago, and kind of the advice here is you got to keep stuff on site to show the insurance company. They had called, furnace stopped working in the middle of the winter. It's a multifamily, so they have to get the heat back up and running because that's part of being a landlord. English was a second language for her. Spanish was her first. My parents are Portuguese, so I told them my best broken Spanish. Hey, don't take that furnace. The insurance company needs to see it. I also told the person replacing the furnace, don't take it. The insurance company needs to see it. Well, we know what happened. Fast forward to Monday, the next day, They go out there to see the claim. The furnace is gone.
Jeez.
The insurance company says, hey, we'll cover this claim if we can see the furnace. But we need to see it with our own eyes, make sure this is what happened. The furnace was gone. It was already at the scrapyard. The lady lost about $5,000 because of that. She had a $1,000 deductible, cost $6,000 to replace the furnace. She lost $5,000.
Wow.
This is not one of our clients, but I had another claim story, just kind of let people know if anything ever happens. So Carlos and I present at first-time homebuyer seminars. And we do our thing. We kind of up there for an hour, and we always end with liability. So liability covers kids and dogs. I always tell this story. So, certain insurance companies don't like certain dogs. The pit bulls, the Rottweilers, the bull mastiffs, kind of the things we all know about.
Mm-hmm.
So after class, the young lady grabs me and says, hey, Jeff, can I ask you a question? Sure. She goes, I have a pit bull. I live in my mother's house. My pit bull had a litter, and the neighbor's daughter came over to see. And I said, okay. She goes, she's 2 years old, and the pit bull nipped her. And I said, what'd she get, about 10 stitches on her? She goes, she got 57 stitches in her face.
Oh, wow.
And she goes, I've received 3 letters from the attorney to forward it to the insurance company, and I'm not doing it. Now, the company she has, I know they will not be okay with the pit bull.
Mm-hmm.
But, I said, you got to follow that claim. I said, 'cause the insurance company's going to pay, and also part of your contract says, once you know, we have to know. Mm-hmm. I said, so, when something like that happens, you want to let the insurance company know, regardless of what the claim is. I mean, Carlos and I could sit here and tell you about lawsuits that have been thrown at the agency for our clients that never resulted in anything. But as soon as you know what's going on, you have to advise your insurance agent so they can tell the carrier what's happening.
Mm. Good advice. Good advice. I have a quick question. We're almost out of time, but I get this question a lot from clients with kids. Trampolines still an issue? Outdoor trampolines an issue with insurers?
It's a great question. So they call that an attractive nuisance. Mm-hmm. So here's the issue. I have a trampoline. My kid's in the backyard playing the trampoline, and they get injured. Mm-hmm. I can't sue myself. So Tara can't look at me and say, Jeff, you're an idiot. You let the kid go on the trampoline, and they got injured. I'm going to sue you. You can't sue yourself because you're a named insured. So named insured is anybody, husband and wife, domestic partners, kids in the house, foster kids, grandparents, anybody living in that property is what they call a named insured. The neighbor's kid comes over and gets injured. Mom and dad can sue me, and that policy is gonna pay.
Right. Great. We're just about out of time. I'm going to give out your contact info. So if anybody out there is looking for insurance or has questions about insurance policies, you can give Jeff a call, 617-298-0655, 617-298-0655, or check them out online at vargasinsurance.com. Guys, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more after this.